Captain Daniel Moore stood on the bridge of the Starward Hope and stared at the message on his screen. He read it 3 times to make sure he understood it correctly. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of history. "They are asking for help," he said quietly. Lieutenant Emma Grant looked up from her communications panel. She was young, barely 30 years old, but she knew what those words meant. Every human knew the story. It was taught in schools. It was told at dinner tables. It was the reason humanity still existed. 30 years ago, the sun had tried to kill them all. A massive solar flare had erupted from Earth's star, larger than anything scientists had ever recorded. The radiation wave was coming, and it would reach Earth in 72 hours. There was no way to stop it. There was no way to survive it. 7 billion people were going to die. Humanity had only recently made contact with the galactic community. They had sent messages to every species they knew, begging for help. The Galactic Assembly had debated for 2 days while the clock counted down. In the end, they voted against intervention. The official reason was the non-interference policy. The real reason was that humans were new and unimportant. Saving them would cost too much and gain too little. Every species turned away, every species except one. They came without permission. They sent every ship they had. They worked without rest for 3 days straight. They evacuated 4 billion humans to temporary shelters on distant moons and stations. They saved half of humanity when no one else would lift a finger. They had asked for nothing in return. They simply said it was the right thing to do. Now, 30 years later, they were the ones who needed help. Daniel turned to Emma. "What exactly does the message say?" Emma pulled up the full transmission. "There is a plague spreading across there. It appeared 6 months ago and it is killing them fast. They have asked the Galactic Assembly for medical aid, but their requests have been. They are asking any friendly species to help them." Daniel frowned. "On what grounds?" "Biological contamination protocols," Emma said. The words tasted bitter in her mouth. "The Assembly says sending ships to a plague zone could spread the disease to other worlds." Daniel laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That is the weakest excuse I have ever heard. They have some of the best quarantine technology in the galaxy." "I know, Captain, but the Assembly has made its decision." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. He looked out the main window at the stars. Somewhere out there, the people who had saved his species were dying. They had risked everything for humanity, and now the galaxy was leaving them to rot. He made his decision in less than 10 seconds. "Change course," he ordered. "Set heading for the maximum speed." Emma did not hesitate. Her fingers moved across the controls. "Course set, Captain. We will arrive in 18 hours. Send a message to Ambassador Brooks on the world. Tell him we are coming. Tell him to gather whatever information he can about this plague." "Yes, Captain." Emma paused. "Sir, you know we are supposed to wait for orders from Earth Command. This could be seen as going against protocol." Daniel turned to face her. His eyes were hard. "Lieutenant, 30 years ago they broke every rule in the Galactic Assembly to save us. They did not wait for permission. They did not worry about protocol. They just came." He pointed at the stars. "Those people are dying and they saved my parents. They saved your grandparents. They saved every single human being alive today. If you think I'm going to sit here and wait for paperwork while they suffer, you do not know me at all." Emma smiled. "I was hoping you would say that, sir." The Starward Hope turned and accelerated into the void. 18 hours later they arrived at the... What Daniel saw made his heart sink. The planet below was beautiful, covered in purple forests and silver oceans, but the orbital stations around it were nearly empty. Ships that should have been coming and going with supplies and traders were nowhere to be seen. They had been abandoned. Ambassador Brooks met them at the main station. He was an older man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been living among them for 15 years, and he loved them like family. "Thank you for coming," said as he shook Daniel's hand. You might be the only ones who will. Tell me everything, Daniel said. Led them to a briefing room and showed them the data. The plague had appeared suddenly in a small village. Within a week, it had spread to 3 cities. Within a month, it covered half the continent. The doctors had tried everything, but nothing worked. The disease attacked their immune systems and left them weak and dying. How many have we lost? Daniel asked. His voice was heavy. 2 million so far, and the number grows every day. Emma studied the medical reports. Something about them bothered her. Ambassador, this disease appeared very suddenly. Has anyone investigated where it came from? Nodded slowly. The scientists have some theories, but nothing concrete. What they do know is that this plague is unlike anything they have seen before. It is almost like it was designed to kill them. Daniel and Emma exchanged a look. The same dark thought crossed both their minds. We need to find out who is behind this, Daniel said, and we need to find a cure, whatever it takes. Looked at the 2 humans before him. He saw the determination in their eyes. It was the same look the rescue crews had worn 30 years ago when they came to save Earth. Humanity remembers its debts, said softly. Daniel nodded. Yes, we do, and we always pay them back. 3 days after Captain Daniel Moore arrived at the 12 more human ships appeared in orbit. They came without orders from Earth Command. They came because the crews had heard what was happening and refused to stay away. Among them was the medical frigate Healing Hand, carrying Dr. Lisa Palmer and her team of researchers. Lisa was one of the best doctors humanity had ever produced. She had spent her career fighting diseases on a dozen worlds. When she heard about the plague, she dropped everything and came. Show me the samples, she said as soon as she stepped off the shuttle. The doctors led her to their main research facility. The building was quiet and sad. Half the staff had already died from the plague. The survivors worked with exhausted eyes and trembling hands, but they never stopped trying. Lisa put on her protective suit and entered the laboratory. She spent 6 hours studying the plague under every scanner and microscope available. When she finally emerged, her face was pale. This is not a natural disease, she said. Daniel and were waiting for her report. They leaned forward when they heard her words. What do you mean? Daniel asked. Lisa pulled up her findings on a display screen. Look at the structure of this virus. It is too perfect. Natural diseases evolve over time. They have flaws and random mutations. This thing has none of that. Every part of it is designed for one purpose, to kill. Felt sick, someone made this plague. Yes, Lisa said. Someone with advanced knowledge of biology and access to sophisticated genetic engineering. This was not an accident. This was an attack. The room fell silent. The truth was worse than any of them had imagined. They were not just dying from a plague. They were being murdered. Daniel clenched his fists. Who would do this? They have no enemies. They have helped more species than anyone can count. Shook his head slowly. That is what I thought too, but I have been digging through assembly records for the past 2 days. I found something disturbing. He brought up a series of documents on the screen. 6 months ago, survey teams discovered massive deposits of rare energy crystals in their outer territories. These crystals are worth more than most planetary economies. The discovery was supposed to make them one of the wealthiest species in the galaxy. Let me guess, Lisa said bitterly. Someone else wants those crystals. The Dominion confirmed. They are the most powerful species in the assembly. They control most of the galactic trade routes, and they have been quietly buying up territory around the systems for the past year. Daniel connected the pieces. They release a plague that kills only, the die out. The assembly declares their worlds abandoned, and the move in to claim everything, including the crystals. Genocide for profit, Emma said. She had been listening from the doorway. That is what this is. Nodded grimly. I have evidence, but it is not complete. We need more proof before we can bring this to the assembly. Then let us get that proof, Daniel said. Over the next week, the humans worked without rest. Lisa and her team studied the plague from every angle, documenting its artificial nature, dug deeper into communications and financial records. Emma used her skills to intercept encrypted messages between officials. Finally, they had enough. The evidence was clear and damning. The Dominion had created the plague and deliberately released it on the. Daniel requested an emergency session of the Galactic Assembly. Representatives from 100 species gathered in the Great Hall to hear the human evidence, presented the findings with careful precision. He showed the genetic markers that proved the plague was engineered. He showed the financial trails that led back to laboratories. He showed the intercepted messages discussing the plan. When he finished, the hall was silent. Then Counselor of the Dominion rose to speak. He was tall and imposing, with cold eyes that showed no emotion. "This is an insult," he declared. "These accusations are based on fabricated evidence and human paranoia. The Dominion has done nothing wrong. We demand that the Assembly dismiss these ridiculous claims." The other representatives shifted nervously. Many of them feared they depended on trade routes and protection. Going against them was dangerous. One by one, they voted to dismiss the human evidence. Daniel watched in disbelief as species after species sided with or abstained from voting. The Assembly had chosen to ignore the truth because the truth was inconvenient. Counselor turned to the human delegation with a thin smile. "I advise humanity to withdraw from space immediately. Any continued interference will be considered a hostile act against the Dominion. There will be consequences." Daniel stood up slowly. He looked around the great hall at all the species who had turned their backs on justice. Then he looked directly at. "We are not going anywhere," he said. "They saved us when no one else would. We will not abandon them now." "Then you will suffer for your foolishness," replied. Daniel smiled coldly. "Maybe, but I promise you this, if we suffer, we will not suffer alone." He walked out of the assembly hall with his head held high. Behind him, the galaxy had made its choice. Now humanity would make theirs. Admiral George Carter was waiting when Daniel returned to the fleet. The old warrior had commanded human forces for 30 years. He remembered being a young man when they came to save his world. "I saw what happened," the admiral said. "The assembly will not help us." "No, sir, they will not." Admiral Carter looked out at the stars. Somewhere in that darkness, the thought they had won. They thought humanity would back down and let them die. They were wrong. "Mobilize the fleet," the admiral ordered. "Every ship we have. If the galaxy will not stand with us, then humanity will stand alone." Plague continued to spread. Every day brought more death. They were a peaceful people and they faced their end with quiet dignity. But their eyes held a question that broke human hearts. Why did the galaxy abandon us? Dr. Lisa Palmer worked until she collapsed from exhaustion. Her team pulled her off the floor and forced her to rest for a few hours, but she was back at her station before dawn. The answer was close. She could feel it. On the 15th day, she found it. "I have the cure," she announced to the room. The doctors gathered around her in disbelief. They had been fighting this plague for months with no success. This human woman had solved it in 2 weeks. "There is a problem," Lisa continued. "The cure requires a compound called 7. It is the only substance that can neutralize the engineered proteins in the virus." "Where do we find this compound?" asked. Lisa's face was grim. "It exists naturally on only 3 worlds in the galaxy. All 3 are in controlled space." The room fell silent. Of course they had planned for this. They had created a plague that could only be cured with resources they controlled. Even if someone found the answer, they could simply refuse to share the cure. Commander Wells stepped forward. She was the leader of an elite human tactical unit called the Grey Wolves. Her soldiers were the best in the human fleet, trained for impossible missions. Then we take it from them, said simply. Admiral Carter approved the mission within the hour, assembled her team and briefed them on the plan. They would enter space quietly, locate a source of 7, extract what they needed, and return before they knew they were there. This is dangerous, told her soldiers. If we are caught, there will be no rescue. They will either kill us or use us as an excuse to attack them directly. Anyone who wants to stay behind can do so with no shame. Not a single soldier moved. The Grey Wolves departed that night in a small, fast ship designed for stealth. They crossed into territory and headed for a mining facility on a moon called 4. The journey took 3 days of careful navigation, avoiding patrols and sensor stations. They reached the moon and landed in a remote crater, led her team through the rocky terrain toward the mining facility. They moved like shadows, silent and precise. The extraction took 4 hours. They filled their containers with enough 7 to cure millions of. Was about to give the order to withdraw when everything went wrong. Alarms screamed across the facility. Soldiers poured out of the buildings, weapons ready. Someone had detected their ship. Move, shouted. The Grey Wolves ran for their lives. Weapons fire lit up the darkness around them. 2 soldiers fell, then 3 more. Kept running, protecting the containers of 7 with her body. If they lost the compound, millions of would die. They reached the ship with half their team wounded and 2 dead. Threw the containers inside and hit the launch sequence. The ship lifted off just as fighters appeared on the horizon. The journey home was a nightmare. Their ship was damaged and slow. Vessels hunted them across 3 star systems, but refused to give up. She nursed the dying engines and pushed through every obstacle. When they finally crossed back into space, 2 human medical ships were waiting to escort them. Barely had the strength to smile. "We have it," she said over the radio. "We have the cure." But the victory came with terrible news. While the Grey Wolves were completing their mission, they had struck. They sent warships to intercept human medical vessels delivering supplies to the... Without warning, they opened fire on unarmed ships carrying doctors and medicine. 247 humans died in the attack. They were volunteers who had come to help. They carried no weapons. They posed no threat, and they killed them anyway. Captain Daniel Moore stood in the morgue and looked at the bodies. He knew some of their names. He had eaten meals with them, shared stories with them, laughed with them. Now they were gone. Admiral Carter arrived and stood beside him. Neither man spoke for a long time. "The claim it was a defensive action," the Admiral finally said. "They say our ships entered their patrol zone and refused orders to withdraw." "That is a lie," Daniel said quietly. "I know." Daniel turned to face the Admiral. His eyes were red but dry. Something inside him had changed. Something hard and cold had taken root. "What happens now, sir?" Admiral Carter took a deep breath. "I have been in contact with Earth. The government has made a decision." He straightened his uniform and looked Daniel in the eye. "We are declaring war on the Dominion." The words hung in the air. War. Against the most powerful species in the galaxy. Against an empire that controlled half the known trade routes. Against an enemy that outnumbered humanity 10 to 1. Daniel nodded slowly. "Good." On the elder Oma lay in a hospital bed. He was the oldest and of his people, and the plague was taking him. He had only days left to live, but when he heard the news, he asked to speak with the humans. Brooks came to his bedside. The old looked up at him with fatting eyes. "Your people are going to war for us," Oma said. His voice was weak but filled with wonder. "We have helped many species over the centuries. We have given aid and shown kindness to hundreds of worlds. Do you know how many came back when we needed them?" Shook his head. "None," the elder said. "Until you, humanity, remembered, humanity came back." Took the old alien's hand. "We could never forget what you did for us." Oma smiled. It was a sad and beautiful thing. Then perhaps our kindness was not wasted after all. Perhaps the favor we gave to humanity will not be lost. Squeezed his hand. It will not be lost, I promise you that. Far above, human warships gathered in formation. The fleet was small compared to the armada. The odds were against them. The galaxy expected them to fail. But humans had never let odds stop them before. The galaxy watched in disbelief as humanity declared war on the Dominion. Most species expected the conflict to last a few weeks at most. Humans were new to space. They were small and weak compared to the ancient powers of the galaxy. That would crush them like insects. General, supreme military commander of the forces, shared this view. He assembled a massive fleet and prepared to end the war quickly. He would destroy the human fleet, occupy there, and make an example of them. Other species would learn what happened to those who the Dominion. The first battle took place in the neutral zone between and space. General sent 50 warships to sweep away the human defenders. He expected an easy victory. He did not get one. Captain Henry Blake commanded the human carrier vessel Iron Will. He had studied tactics for years, learning their patterns and weaknesses. While they fought with rigid formations and predictable strategies, Henry fought with chaos and creativity. When the fleet arrived, they found the human ships scattered across the system in what appeared to be disorder, ordered his forces to pursue and destroy them. The ships spread out to chase the fleeing humans. It was a trap. The moment the formation broke apart, human ships emerged from hiding spots behind asteroids and moons. They struck the isolated vessels from every direction. The battle turned into a dozen smaller fights where human speed and flexibility gave them the advantage. Davis was the best pilot in the human fleet. She flew a small fighter that darted between warships like a bird through trees. Her squadron targeted the enemy command ships, disabling their communications and leaving the forces confused and uncoordinated. By the time General realized what was happening, he had lost 12 ships. He ordered a retreat, and the remaining vessels fled back to friendly space. The galaxy was shocked. A species that had existed in space for barely a century had defeated the mightiest military in known history. It was luck, General told the Dominion Council. The humans caught us off guard. It will not happen again. But it did happen again and again. Chief Engineer Samuel Torres had spent years developing new weapons for the human fleet. His greatest achievement was a device that could neutralize shields. These shields had protected the Dominion for thousands of years. No species had ever found a way through them. Samuel found a way. With their shields disabled, ships were vulnerable. Human weapons tore through their hulls like paper. In battle after battle, the advantage disappeared. The war spread across multiple star systems. Human forces used guerrilla tactics that they had never seen before. They attacked supply lines and fuel depots. They struck at night and disappeared before the enemy could respond. They used false signals and decoy ships to confuse sensors. Captain Henry Blake became famous for his impossible victories. He once led a fleet of 20 ships against a base defended by 80 warships. Using a combination of stealth, misdirection, and perfectly timed attacks, he destroyed the base and escaped with only minor losses. Davis earned the nickname Ghost because her squadron seemed to appear from nowhere and vanish just as quickly. She personally destroyed more ships than any other pilot in the fleet. General grew desperate. Every strategy he tried failed. Every trap he set backfired. The humans seemed to know what he was planning before he did it. "How are they doing this?" he demanded of his advisors. "They are children compared to us. They should not be able to fight like this." One of his officers spoke carefully. "General, the humans are different from other species we have fought. They do not follow rules or traditions. They adapt to every situation. When we change our tactics, they change theirs faster. It is like fighting water. You cannot grab it and it finds every crack in your armor." slammed his fist on the table. Then we will drown them in numbers, send every ship we have. They assembled the largest fleet in their history. 300 warships gathered at the edge of human space, ready to end the war once and for all. Admiral Carter studied the enemy formation from the bridge of his flagship. His fleet was outnumbered 3-1. Every conventional analysis said he would lose. But Admiral Carter had never been conventional. "Signal all ships," he ordered. "Prepare for Operation Falling Star." The battle that followed would be remembered for centuries. The humans did not try to match the ship for ship. Instead, they drew the enemy fleet into a dense asteroid field where the massive warships could not maneuver effectively. Human pilots wove through the rocks with deadly skill. Samuel Torres deployed mines that crippled dozens of vessels. Davis led a suicide run against the enemy flagship, damaging it so badly that General had to abandon ship. When the battle ended, they had lost over 100 ships. Their great fleet was broken. The path to the Dominion lay open. Other species in the assembly began to pay attention. For the first time in history, someone was standing up to thee and winning. Quietly, secretly, they started sending supplies and intelligence to the human fleet. They were not brave enough to fight openly, but they wanted humanity to succeed. General stood on the bridge of his new flagship and watched the human fleet approaching his. He had underestimated them. He had thought they were weak and foolish. He had believed that threatening them would make them back down. Now his empire was crumbling, and it was too late to change course. "They are just humans," he whispered to himself. "How did this happen?" His advisor stood beside him, watching the enemy ships grow larger on the screen. "Perhaps that is exactly the problem, General. They are humans, and we forgot what that means." Far away on the millions of survivors received the cure that the gray wolves had brought back. The plague was finally being stopped. They would survive. And in the stars above, human warships prepared to finish what they had started. They hung in space like a jewel. It was a beautiful planet, covered in golden plains and vast cities that had stood for 10,000 years. The heart of an empire that had ruled the galaxy without challenge. Until now. Admiral Carter stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the world before him. Human ships surrounded it on every side. The planetary defense grid was still active, but everyone knew it would not hold forever. He picked up his communicator. "This is Admiral George Carter of the Human Defense Fleet. I am addressing the leadership of the Dominion." His voice was broadcast across the planet. Billions have heard it. So did the Galactic Assembly, watching from their distant stations. "You created a plague to murder an innocent species. You killed unarmed volunteers who came to help. You have committed crimes that cannot be forgiven, but I am not here for revenge." He paused to let his words sink in. "I am offering you a choice. Surrender now. Confess your crimes to the galaxy. Pay full reparations to the people. Remove the leaders who planned this genocide. If you do these things, your world will be spared. Your people will live." General responded from the surface. His voice was tired but defiant. "Humanity cannot dictate terms to the... We have defended this world for 1,000 generations. We will never bow to a young species that barely knows how to walk among the stars." Admiral Carter sighed. He had hoped it would not come to this. "Then you leave me no choice. Commander Wells, begin the operation." Wells had recovered from her wounds and was ready for action. Her rebuilt Grey Wolves team infiltrated the planet using small stealth craft. Their mission was simple: disable the planetary defense grid without harming civilians. It should have been impossible. The grid was protected by the best security they had ever developed. It had thousands of redundant systems and millions of guards. And her team shut it down in 6 hours. They moved through the capital like ghosts. They bypassed security systems that had never been breached. They neutralized guards without killing them. They planted devices that disrupted power to the defense stations across the planet. When the last station went dark, sent a single message: "Grid down, sky is open." General watched his defenses fail one by one. He could not believe what he was seeing. His unbreakable fortress was being torn apart by a small team of humans who should not have been able to reach the surface at all. "How?" he whispered. "How are they doing this?" His aide had no answer. With the defense grid disabled, human ships descended toward the capital. Thousands of soldiers landed in the streets, but they did not attack civilians. They surrounded government buildings and military installations. They came for the leaders, not the people. Counselor tried to escape. He was captured within the hour. General considered fighting to the end. He still had loyal soldiers who would die for him, but as he looked out at the human forces, he realized the truth. More fighting would only bring more death. And for what? His empire had already fallen. He walked out of his command center and surrendered. The war was over. In the days that followed, the truth of what they had done spread across the galaxy. The evidence was presented to the Galactic Assembly. Counselor and his conspirators were tried and convicted of crimes against sentient life. They would spend the rest of their existence in prison. The Dominion paid massive reparations to the people. They provided resources to help rebuild what the plague had destroyed. The energy crystals that had started the whole conflict were placed under control, as they should have been from the beginning. Although the plague was finally defeated, Dr. Lisa Palmer's cure had saved millions of lives that would not just survive, they would thrive again. Elder Oma did not live to see the end of the war. He died peacefully, knowing that his people would be saved. But before he passed, he recorded a message to be played at the Galactic Assembly. His voice was weak, but clear as it echoed through the great hall. "I have lived for many years and seen many things. I have watched species rise and fall. I have seen great kindness and terrible cruelty. But in all my time, I never saw anything like what humanity did for us. 30 years ago, we helped them because it was right. We expected nothing in return. We did not know if they would even survive, but they remembered. When our hour came, when the galaxy turned its back on us, humanity came. They risked everything. They fought against impossible odds. They bled and died for a species that was not their own, not for profit, not for power, but because we helped them once and they never forgot. Let the galaxy remember this. A favor to humanity is never lost. Their gratitude is deeper than the void between stars. Their loyalty is stronger than the mightiest warship, and their revenge when their friends are hurt can shake the universe. To the humans who saved us, I say thank you. And to the galaxy, I give this warning: be careful how you treat them, for humanity remembers. They always remember." The assembly sat in stunned silence. In the years that followed, the galaxy changed. Species that had ignored humanity now competed to become their allies. Everyone wanted the protection that came with human friendship. Everyone feared what would happen if they became human enemies. Captain Daniel Moore returned to the one last time. He stood before a memorial that listed every human who had died in the war. Doctors, soldiers, volunteers, people who gave their lives so that strangers might live. The inscription at the bottom was simple: "They remembered." Emma Grant stood beside him, looking at the names. "Was it worth it?" she asked quietly. Daniel thought about the question. He thought about the friends he had lost. He thought about the battles they had fought. He thought about the children who would grow up free because of what humans had done. "They saved us when we were nothing," he said finally. "They asked for nothing in return. They just did what was right." He looked up at the purple sky of the world. "We did the same. And yes, it was worth it. It will always be worth it." Somewhere in the galaxy, other species were watching. They saw what happened when you helped humanity. They saw what happened when you hurt them. And they learned a lesson that would echo through the ages. Humanity never forgets a kindness, and they never forget a betrayal. The universe had been warned.